Hey guys, tonight we travel back, way back, to the damp, dark alleys of medieval Europe. The stars are out, but barely. A fog is creeping low over cobbled streets. You crouch behind a barrel waiting for the guard to move. Your boots are soaked, your stomach's growling, and you're already wondering what poor life choices led you here. You're a medieval assassin, but not the cool, slick, hooded kind from video games. Nope, you're the real deal, the smelly, underpaid, slightly malnourished kind. You're not James Bond, you're not Ezio Auditore. You're basically the guy who gets blamed when anything suspicious happens within a 5-mile radius. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. I love seeing that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You inch along the stone wall, knees creaking like a haunted door. It's not even midnight yet and your back is soaked through, not with rain, but stress. That itchy wool cloak they gave you, yeah, that's not stopping anything. It smells faintly of sheep and mold and has a suspicious brown stain you're trying not to think about. The city around you is asleep mostly. Windows are shuttered, fires burn low. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere else a drunk sings badly about St. George and his dragon. You pause under an archway. The wooden sign above sways gently. The Pig and Plough. A tavern. You could go in, you could just disappear inside, order a greasy stew and pretend your entire assassin life was just a weird fever dream. But no. You were hired. You have a name, a face, and a very angry nobleman who paid you 6 silver coins to make sure that face never smiles again. Let's rewind a little. You didn't grow up dreaming of being an assassin. No one does. You were probably a second or third son in a dirt-poor family. The farm was already inherited by your older brother, the one with fewer fleas. Maybe you tried joining the church, but Latin was hard and you snored too loud during Vespers. Or maybe your village got raided and you just learn to survive. Either way, here you are. You remember your first job, don't you? It was a simple message run, or so they said. Take this scroll to the man in the red cloak. Innocent, right? Except the scroll contained a hit list, and the man in the red cloak handed you a dagger and said, pick one. You thought he was joking. He wasn't. From there, things escalated. Fast. Turns out you're good at going unnoticed. You can blend in with the shadows, slip through crowds, and you're desperate enough to say yes when people ask you to do bad things for worse reasons. The pay is never good. Let's get that out of the way now. People think assassins make a fortune, maybe the legendary ones. But you're lucky if you get paid at all. Half the time your employers get arrested or beheaded before payday. And even when they do pay, it's in weird currency, like goat hides, stale bread, or once, memorably, a broken lute. And the danger? Constant. If it's not guards looking for you, it's rival assassins who think you're working on their turf, or the baker who's convinced you poisoned his cousin's soup. You didn't. But you were in the tavern that night, so now he watches you like a hawk. Right now, you're on your way to your newest assignment, a merchant, mid-level target. Probably corrupt, definitely paranoid. You've heard rumors he wears a dagger in his boot and sleeps with one eye open. That's not just a phrase, it's an actual condition. You make a mental note not to get too close during the ambush. You duck into a side street, nearly tripping over a beggar curled beneath a wool blanket. He snores like a demon gargling soup. You envy his ability to sleep, because that's something no one tells you about this job, the insomnia. You don't sleep, not really. Every creak is a threat. Every shadow might be a trap. You learn to nap in shifts. 10 minutes here, a blink there. Your dreams, when they come, are chaotic and oddly vivid. Sometimes you're falling, sometimes you're running, sometimes you're being chased by a very large chicken. That might be the stew talking. You finally reach the merchant's house. 3 stories, timbered walls, obnoxiously expensive lanterns flickering at the doorway. A guard snores on a stool, head bobbing like a puppet. You check your pouch, rope, dagger, wax key, and your lucky pebble. You rub it once for luck. Doesn't help, it never helps, but the routine comforts you. You slip around back, heart thudding, eyes darting. You reach for the latch on the cellar door, and it creaks, loudly. The guard stirs, you freeze. A beetle crawls over your boot. The moment stretches like week-old cheese. Then the guard mutters something about cheese demons and slumps again. You exhale. That was close. Again. You enter the cellar. The air smells of wet stone, wine, and regret. Your boots echo faintly. Somewhere a rat scurries. You whisper an apology. He was here first. You ascend the wooden stairs, step by agonizing step. Each one creaks louder than the last. You hold your breath, grip the dagger, and nudge open the door to the main hall. And there he is. The merchant, snoring in a velvet chair by the fire, a goblet in one hand, drool pooling on his doublet. You hesitate. This part is always the hardest, the actual doing, because beneath the dirt and desperation you still have a conscience. Somewhere, maybe, a floorboard shifts upstairs. You decide, now or never. You move swiftly. 1 second, one cut, it's done. The goblet falls, the fire crackles, a new silence settles. You exhale, mission complete, except it never is. You hear footsteps, you run, you don't stop until dawn. Another day, another regret, another name on a list that won't let you sleep. Section 2, you wake up in a ditch. Not metaphorically, an actual ditch. Half covered in leaves, your cloak twisted around your legs like a stubborn blanket and a slug crawling heroically across your forehead. Your first thought, oh right, I survived. Your second, is this mud warm? It isn't, but your body is so exhausted you're past the point of caring. You sit up slowly, every muscle creaking like a rusty hinge, and try to piece together last night. The job's done, that much you're sure of, but you still had to run for your life because you left via the front door. Again, a rookie mistake. The thing is, no one tells you what the day after feels like. There's no hero's parade, no secret guild waiting to clap you on the back, no fanfare. Just bruised knees, aching feet, and a gnawing feeling in your gut that maybe, just maybe, this life isn't as cool as the legends made it sound. Because let's talk about that, shall we? The job description. It promised intrigue, mystery, silent rooftop leaps, and the occasional whispered line like, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Sounds deep, right? But reality is waiting outside in the rain for 9 hours while your target has a surprise birthday party that throws off your entire plan. It's eating hard bread under a bridge and pretending it's part of your discipline. It's using a bent spoon to pick a lock while a rat judges you from the corner. And the worst part, you chose this, well, sort of, not in the way someone chooses to be a poet or a stonemason, but because life didn't leave many doors open for people like you didn't have land, or noble blood, or the patience for a monastery. You remember when you first heard the stories, a man in a hood, silent as smoke, leaping from rooftops, toppling kings with a flick of a blade. He always escaped, always knew what to do, always got the girl, the gold, and the applause. You wanted that. What you got instead was trench foot, fleas, and a permanent state of mild paranoia. It doesn't help that people assume assassins are fearless. They imagine you walk through fire, that you laugh at death. No, you are terrified. Constantly, of slipping, of being seen, of failure, of accidentally killing the wrong person because they wore the same hat as your target. That actually happened once. The wrong guy wore a red feather. That red feather haunts you. Oh, and don't even get started on the clients. They never say what they mean. Make sure he won't be a problem anymore, they whisper. Take care of it quietly. You'd think you were delivering bad news, not removing someone from the realm of the living. One noble woman hired you to silence a rival. You thought she meant politically. Turns out she meant literally. She gave you a sack of coins and said, if he says a word again, I'll know you failed. And when you asked how she'd know, she just smiled. Historians still argue whether some of these high society vendettas were exaggerated in the records or were truly that unhinged. But trust me, when you've sat across from someone wearing pearls and blood on their shoes, you learn not to ask too many questions. The clients also have one very annoying habit, changing their minds. You'll be halfway to the target's estate, having studied his habits for a week, when a messenger gallops up. His lordship says never mind, just scare him instead. So now you're out of a payday and you've got to figure out how to look threatening without saying a word or drawing your blade. One time, you resorted to hiding in a tree and dropping a sheep's skull onto the man's carriage. It worked, but you lost your balance and landed on a goose. That goose never forgave you. Also, don't expect loyalty from anyone. If you're caught, the same noble who paid you might be the first to denounce you. An unaffiliated madman, they'll say, certainly not one of ours. You'll be tortured, interrogated, and used as a political scapegoat in a public execution while the noble watches from a velvet seat eating candied figs. You tried once to leave the business. You had a little money saved, you planned to open a candle shop, just wax and peace. Simple, honest work. You made it 3 days before someone from your past showed up with a final favor. You said no, they burned the shop down. Quitting? Not really an option, and don't forget the social aspect, or lack of it. You can't have friends, not real ones. Who do you confide in? Hey, yeah, so I work nights, mostly removing unwanted people from existence. Anyway, pass the ale. Relationships. Hilarious. You tried once, a lovely girl from the market. Bright eyes, soft voice, smelled like apples and lavender. She asked too many questions, you answered too few. One night you came back from a job with blood on your collar and a wound across your ribs. She patched you up, didn't say a word. Next morning she was gone, took your coin pouch and your last pair of clean socks. You can't even be mad. So now, sitting in this muddy ditch, you run a mental checklist. Still breathing? Check. Still wanted by at least 3 local lords. Also check. Still unsure why you ever thought this was a good idea? Triple check. You get up slowly, your knees crack, your back aches. You smell like old meat and shame. The birds are chirping now, the sky is just starting to lighten. And you know what that means. Time to find a place to sleep. You can't risk being seen during daylight, not after a kill. Not when you still have blood on your boots, which you do. You'll scrub it off in a trough later. As you limp toward the edge of the forest, you pass a group of farmers heading into town. One of them nods at you. You nod back, trying to look like a lost traveler. Not a murderer. Your whole life is pretending to be a beggar. Pretending to be a merchant, pretending to be someone who sleeps at night and smiles at strangers. You find a hollow tree and curl up inside. It's not comfortable. Nothing ever is. But at least it's quiet. And for a moment, just a moment, you let yourself imagine a different life, one where you don't have to hide, one where the job description wasn't a lie. Section 3. You dream of silence. Not the kind you're used to, the heavy, suspicious quiet that hangs before a trap is sprung, but real silence, a cottage in the hills. A fire crackling, bread baking, the kind of silence you could live inside without checking over your shoulder every 5 seconds. But when you wake, it's to birds, loud, obnoxious birds. Somewhere a crow cackles like it knows all your secrets. You blink, the tree hollow you slept in creaks with your shifting weight. Something in your neck has officially given up. Time to move, because you're not just surviving, you're still learning. And believe it or not, there was a kind of training loosely, if you squint hard enough and ignore the part where most of it involved getting punched for practice. See, formal training wasn't really a thing. There was no Hogwarts for hired killers, no medieval assassin academy handing out diplomas and matching cloaks. Most of what you learned came from other desperate souls, older, more bitter, and only slightly more skilled. Your first mentor was a man named Aldrich, tall, missing 2 fingers. Smelled like pickled onions and regret. He taught you how to move silently, which mostly involved not stepping on loud things. Avoid sticks. Avoid gravel, avoid chickens. Chickens are traitors, he'd mutter. Historians still argue whether guilds of assassins were formally organized or if they were just loose webs of shady men doing shady things. There are some records of secret orders, but just as many point to random thugs who happened to be good at climbing walls and keeping secrets. Aldrich had one trick, the rope climb. You hated it, still do. Hanging upside down from a beam with your dagger in your teeth might sound exciting until you fall. Which you did, repeatedly. You learned to pick locks from a woman named Lisette who charged 2 coins per lesson and once stole your boots while you were distracted. She said it was part of the test. You never saw those boots again. And then there was the guy who tried to teach you poison. That went badly. He gave you a vial and said, "Don't touch your eyes." You did. You cried for 2 days. You're still not sure if he was testing your resilience or just a jerk. What most people don't get is that there was no single fighting style, no standardized technique. You fought dirty because you had to. Elbows, throat jabs, pocket sand. Whatever worked. You once took down a knight using a fishbone and a distraction involving 2 geese. Not proud of that one, but hey, a win's a win. Weapons were a whole thing too. You didn't get a shiny blade forged by a master smith. You got what you could steal or buy cheap. Daggers with uneven balance, rusty knives, the occasional short sword, usually too long to conceal and too short to impress. There was a guy you knew who carried throwing knives, wanted to be dramatic, spent 3 days practicing on trees. First mission, he threw one at a moving target and hit a nun by mistake. She was fine. He wasn't. Last you heard, he was digging ditches in penance. You keep your tools simple now. 1 blade, hidden. A rope, a tiny mirror, a vial or 2 of something that smells suspiciously like vinegar and maybe death. You also learn to train your face, blank, forgettable. You practice walking like a servant, speaking like a drunk, staring like a farmer with nothing on his mind but mud and potatoes. It's not glamorous, but it works. You pass through crowds unnoticed because you don't look like someone with secrets. And gods, the things you learn that no one teaches. How to kill without blinking, how to smile while lying, how to spot the twitch in a guard's eye that means he's seen something. How to sleep with 1 hand on your knife and 1 ear open. You try not to think about how this training changes you, but it does. You used to wince at the sight of blood. Now you check how fresh it is. You used to pray before a job. Now you just nod at the nearest cathedral and hope the saints aren't paying too much attention. You're not proud, but pride doesn't keep you alive. And then there's the test no one warns you about, your first mistake. Yours came early. A rich man's son. Smug, drunk, he insulted the wrong person at the wrong feast. You were hired to end him. You waited in the shadows. He came out to relieve himself. You moved too soon. The blade caught his sleeve, not his neck. He turned, screamed. You panicked. You ran. The guards chased you for 2 days. You had to jump into a river, steal a goat cart, and hide in a midden heap. You can still smell it sometimes when you close your eyes. After that, you learned to wait. To watch, to breathe. You also learned to bring backup. Not another person, too risky, but a second plan, a fire to distract. A bribe in your pocket, a fake name ready in case you're questioned. Now, years later, you're better. Not brilliant, not invincible, but efficient. Quiet, maybe even feared, still, it never feels like enough. Every town you enter, you scan for exits. Every person you meet, you assess for threats. You walk like you belong. You sleep like you don't, you're never really off. And the dreams, they change. Not just silence now, but old faces. Missed targets, screaming you never heard but somehow remember. You wake more tired than when you slept. So you train, again, on your own now. You balance on rooftop beams. You time your steps to bells. You toss pebbles into puddles to learn how sound carries. You become less person, more shadow, and some days that feels like winning. Other days, it just feels like disappearing. Section 4. You're perched on a roof now. The town below flickers with candlelight, muffled voices drifting up like smoke. And you're thinking about your gear, if you can even call it that. Let's get one thing clear. Medieval assassins didn't have gadgets, no grappling hooks with retractable cords, no smoke bombs in fancy brass canisters, no hidden blade mechanisms that snap out with a satisfying shkt. Your toolkit was more, what can I shove in my belt pouch and not die? Take your dagger, for instance. It's basic, worn, the leather grip is cracked. But it's reliable, you know the weight, you know the balance. It's not for show, it's for getting in and getting out before anyone realizes what just happened. Still, you sometimes dream of better tools. There's a blacksmith in Bruges who, rumor has it, forged a knife so sharp it could split a hair mid-air. Too bad it also cost as much as a horse. And you, well, you once had a horse for 36 hours. Before it ran away with a travelling mime troupe. Long story. Your current tools include a curved blade, a wax-pressed copy of a door key, probably only works in one part of town, a tiny vial of something that might be poison or vinegar, the label fell off, a flintstone, and a rope that's been fraying since last winter. And your boots squeak now, which is just unfortunate. You tried once to create something clever like a spring-loaded wrist knife. You studied drawings, asked a tinker for help, and wound up stabbing yourself in the thigh during testing. You bled on his blueprints. He asked you never to return. Because here's the reality. Ingenuity was limited by materials, by trust, and by the risk of looking too suspicious. A guy walking around with metal braces full of wires and tubes. People notice. Guards ask questions. You want to look poor, harmless. Like someone no one would remember. Still, assassins of the time did have tricks. One of your favorites, the hollow loaf. Bread with a surprise tucked inside, a blade, a scroll, sometimes a dose of nightshade. You once used it to sneak into a banquet. Acted like a poor kitchen boy. When the moment came, no one saw it coming. They were too busy dunking their trencher into soup. Historians still argue whether devices like spring traps, hidden compartments in cloaks, or poison rings were widespread or rare curiosities. Some say they were the mark of elite killers. Others think they're just romantic exaggerations from later storytellers. You've seen a poison ring, once. The man who wore it died after scratching his nose too hard. You shift your weight on the rooftop tile. It groans under you, threatening to betray your position to the snoring guard below. You hold your breath, count to 6, the wind moves a banner gently. He doesn't stir, you sigh, you used to carry a crossbow. Compact, good for rooftop jobs, until it jammed in the middle of a job and you had to beat a noble's bodyguard unconscious with it. It bent the frame. Now it's a paperweight in a safe house you haven't visited in months. There was also a phase where you experimented with smoke. Not the flashy kind, just a pouch of dried herbs and hay that, when tossed on coals, filled the room fast. Effective, but you once used too much and knocked out the wrong room. That job ended with you dangling from a tree, pantsless, explaining yourself to an angry monk. And don't forget costumes, not disguises, that's too fancy. Just clothes that change how people see you, peasant tunics with fake holes, a scullery maid's apron. Once during winter you posed as a mute chimney sweep. You didn't speak for 5 days, got so used to silence you forgot how your voice sounded. Still, the most useful thing in your arsenal? Confidence. Fake it hard enough, and half the town will think you belong. You've walked past armed guards holding nothing but a loaf of bread and a confident strut. It's raining now, of course. Always is when you're trying to stay dry. You check your pouch, the wax key has warped. Great, it probably melted a little while you were waiting in the sun yesterday. That means you'll need a new plan. Again, you pull out a piece of charcoal and start sketching on the back of an old parchment, the layout of the house. Entry points, guard patterns, you've done this 100 times. It never gets easier, just more familiar. You're tired of working with junk. You're tired of improvising. You once heard of a group in Venice, so well funded they had a room full of custom tools, but they also killed each other off in a feud about whose cloak colour was more authentic. It's always something. Still, tonight's job matters. You're not sure why yet, but your employer, hooded, hushed, smelled faintly of rose oil and grave dirt, paid in advance. That never happens, and he gave you a token, a small iron medallion, carved with a bird's eye. You don't know what it means, but it hums when you hold it. You try not to think about it. The lock on the merchant's back door is old, iron, and stubborn. You kneel, tools in hand, rain trickling down your back. Your fingers slip, the pick bends, you curse softly under your breath, nothing too profane. Just enough to let the door know you're not messing around. Then, click, you're in. You wipe your tools on your sleeve, tuck them away, slide the door shut behind you. The hall is dark, smells like wine, wax, and too much money. You count your steps. Right, left, step over the squeaky floorboard. You're getting good at this, which is the problem, because the better you get, the harder the jobs get. The higher the stakes, and the more likely it is that the next gadget you don't have might be the one that could have saved your life. Section 5. The tavern is dark, smoky, and smells like spilled ale, unwashed men, and desperation. Which is to say, perfectly normal. You slide into a corner booth, hood low, fingers resting on the hilt of your blade, not dramatically, just in case. Across from you is your employer, at least that's what he claims. You know better than to ask for names. Names are trouble, names are leverage. He's middle-aged, with fingernails too clean for a working man and boots too new for someone who claims to have travelled far. He orders goat cheese and ale. You get bread, stale. Possibly from last Tuesday. He leans in, whispers the job. Something about betrayal. A merchant who's been feeding information to the wrong side. He's slippery, the man says. Discreet. Protected. You nod as if that's new information. It never is. Then he slides the pouch across the table. Payment. You peek inside, a few silver coins, a scrap of cloth with a symbol inked on it, and, of course, a dried sprig of rosemary. These people love their symbols. You ask one question. When? He shrugs. Soon. Of course, and that's how most jobs begin. In a tavern, or a brothel, or a roadside inn where the roof leaks and the stew tastes like regret. Forget candlelit meetings in secret tunnels. You meet where people aren't paying attention, because the more crowded the room, the more privacy you actually have. And the employers? A mixed bag of nobles, merchants, monks, and more. Once a nun paid you to send a message to a knight who mocked her order. You did. The knight still walks with a limp, but here's the thing, you never trust them. The moment they hand you the target, they're already calculating whether you might be next. Assassins are useful, but they're also liabilities. Historians still argue whether assassins had ongoing relationships with their patrons or were burned after one job. You know the answer. It depends on how paranoid the patron is. And trust you, you've never met a calm noble. You leave the tavern after paying with your own coin. The employer? Gone. He always leaves first, always disappears into the fog like a bad idea. You tuck the payment away, not in your purse. That's how you get robbed. You hide it in a pouch under your arm, next to the knife no one knows you carry. Back on the street, everything looks different. The job has begun. Every cart, every pedestrian, every window suddenly feels like part of the game board. You're moving through a city of possibilities and traps. You pass a baker pulling loaves from the oven. You nod. He scowls. You once borrowed a pie from his windowsill during a job. Apparently it was meant for a wedding. You didn't know. You didn't care. But the bride's mother still glares at you in church. You check your mark's location. A tall townhouse near the market square. You've seen it before. Guarded, but not too much. A man who knows he's being watched, but thinks he's clever enough to stay ahead of it. Classic. You scout for entry points. Back door. Side alley. A cellar, maybe. You won't act tonight. Tonight is for watching. Patience is half the job. The other half is not dying. You stake out a position on a rooftop across the street, lying flat on the damp tiles. It's cold. Your cloak is too thin. You wonder if your employer could afford thicker fabric. Probably. He looked warm. You watch the merchant's house. Lamps flicker behind the shutters. Shadows move. People talk. A dog barks. Time stretches. You eat a piece of dry cheese from your pack. You chew slowly, carefully. Anything to stay alert. You once fell asleep on a job and woke up to find someone had stolen your boots. Again. Same guy, probably. 3 hours pass. You learn a lot in 3 hours. How many guards, how they rotate, where the maid leaves to visit her lover. Where the merchant paces when he's nervous. You mark all of it. Then you return to the safe house. A cellar beneath a butcher's shop. Smells like blood and onions. You sleep with your knife on your chest and one eye half open. You dream of being chased. Again. Morning comes. You rise and prepare. The city is louder in daylight. Carts rattle, vendors shout, chickens do whatever chickens do. You move through it like mist, unseen. You wear a different cloak today. You bought it for 2 coins and it smells like cabbage. Perfect. You pass your employer again. He doesn't acknowledge you. That's the rule. You're invisible until the job is done. Then, maybe, he nods, or he vanishes and leaves your payment with a boy who doesn't ask questions. You hate it, but it's safer. Once, a client waved at you. Publicly. Loudly. You had to leave the city for 6 weeks and grow a beard to avoid recognition. Never again. As the sun sets, you return to the merchant's home. Tonight's the night. You have the layout memorized. The guard shift timed, the dog's location, the creaky step, the weak lock. You whisper to yourself as you walk. In, out. Silent, done. It's never that simple, but the words help. You reach the house, pause, you listen. Nothing. You move. A flick of the wrist. A twist of the pick. The door opens like it's tired of resisting. Inside, it's dark. Warm, too warm. You freeze. Something's wrong. A voice whispers, "Took you long enough." And that's when you realize the employer didn't hire you to kill the merchant. He hired the merchant to trap you. Section 6. Your instincts scream. You drop low, blade already in hand, heart hammering in your chest like a war drum. The voice came from the left, a shadow leaning against the staircase, arms crossed like he's been waiting hours. You scan the room. No sign of the merchant, no guards either. Just this man, cloaked, calm, dangerous in a way you can feel, not see. You know his type, because he's your type. "You were sloppy," he says, stepping into the light. You catch the glint of a dagger at his hip, a slight limp in his step, and great, he's wearing your old guild's insignia, a curled serpent biting its own tail. You burned that patch off your own tunic years ago. He's not smiling, but his tone is amused. "I watched you for days." You're slower now. You don't respond. Your blade shifts slightly in your grip. If he lunges, he won't reach you in time. Probably, but he doesn't. Instead, he tosses a pouch onto the table. It jingles. Silver. "I was told to let you go," he says. "But I wanted to see you first. For old times. Old times, yeah." The same old times that ended with someone planting a trap beneath your bedroll and two of your so-called brothers selling your name for a bottle of mead. You remember him now. Colder. Fast hands, faster mouth. You once pulled him out of a frozen river during a job in Bern. He paid you back by stealing your maps and blaming you for a botched assassination. "You working with the merchant?" you ask low. He shakes his head. "No, I'm working with your employer." Of course, the man from the tavern. The clean fingernails, the vague instructions, the token. "It's a test," Calder says, "to see if you're still useful. You passed." Barely. You want to gut him, but instead you say nothing. That's what they hate most, your silence. It unnerves them. "You'll get another job soon," he continues. This was the warm-up. Then he turns and disappears out the front door, just like that. No fight, no warning, just more questions. You wait a beat, too, then you move. Because here's the truth, no one tells you about this life. You're never the only blade in the room. There's always someone watching, someone faster, someone younger, and sometimes someone worse. That merchant you thought was the target. He's gone, maybe he never existed, maybe he was a decoy. Or maybe he was you, once. You leave the house through the cellar this time. Safer, colder, you check every shadow like it's your last. Back on the street, you blend into the crowd. You find a cloaked figure watching from a distance. You double back. Gone. Maybe they were never watching. Maybe they always were. You need a safe house, not the butcher's cellar. That's compromised now. You think of Marta's barn outside the west wall, last used during the famine. You still have a key hidden under a loose stone. You make your way through winding alleys, stepping over filth, nodding to cats like they're gatekeepers of the underworld. One of them follows you for 3 blocks. You're not sure whether it's a spy or just a hungry gremlin in disguise. When you reach the barn, it's still standing. Just barely. You slip inside, bar the door, and finally collapse into a heap of hay that smells like dust and old dreams. You stare at the ceiling. So, the employer is testing you again. You thought you were past this, past the games, the traps, the whispered, prove yourself nonsense, but no. You're still on a leash, just one that's harder to see. You pull out the pouch Calder left. Count the coins, 8 silver, real. Marked with the crest of House Irin. Interesting, not your usual clients. Rich, ruthless, tied to every scandal this side of the river. If they want you, it's for something big. You also find a slip of parchment, folded tight. One word, soon. That's it. You laugh. Quiet, bitter, because this is what they do. They dangle meaning in front of you. Keep you dancing, performing, killing for reasons you're never fully told. And what if you refused? You know the answer. They'd send someone else. Someone like Calder. You drift into sleep eventually, uneasy. But deep, the kind of exhaustion that even fear can't hold back, and you dream. Not of silence, not this time. You dream of a target who doesn't die. It's a week later when you get the next assignment. A messenger, 12 years old, dirt-smudged, wearing your guild's old ring around his neck. He says nothing, just hands you a sealed letter and disappears before you can blink. Inside, instructions. Name, city, Tyre. The name? You recognize it. You've heard it whispered in prison cells, painted on tavern walls in blood and wine. A man who's escaped every assassination attempt, protected by mercenaries, rumors, and something darker. Historians still argue whether men like him were real, shadow warlords who ruled from behind curtains, or just boogeymen made up to scare apprentices. You'll find out soon enough. You start packing. Rope, blade, new boots, thank the saints. As you leave the barn, a voice echoes in your head. Took you long enough. You hate Calder. But he's not wrong, because the stakes just changed, and now failure doesn't mean punishment. It means becoming the next name on someone else's list. Section 7. You've been following the merchant. No, not a merchant anymore. Let's call him what he is now. A target who doesn't die for 3 days. And the longer you watch him, the more annoyed you get. First of all, the man has too much help. Servants, guards, friends, dogs, too many variables. Second, he's always moving. No patterns, no habits. He doesn't even walk the same road twice in one day. One moment he's drinking wine at a tavern by the harbour. The next he's halfway up a bell tower speaking with a robed man who never takes off his gloves. You begin to wonder if he knows, if he senses you, if this is a game of chicken between ghosts, who sees who first, who slips first, who blinks. But even in this cat and mouse game, something else is driving you mad, the smell. Because let's be honest, everything smells. Always, your boots haven't dried since the river crossing. They smell like old cheese and regret. The streets reek of rotting fish, wet horses and unwashed bodies crammed too close together. You pass a butcher's stall and gag on the coppery stench of blood mixed with yesterday's sun. But the worst. The target himself. He wears rosewater, thick, cloying, the kind that sticks to your nostrils and drags behind him like an invisible banner. You'd think it'd make him easier to track, but no. Because everyone else at court has started wearing the same thing. Fashion, they call it. You call it olfactory camouflage. You've now followed 5 wrong men because they smelled like him. At night, you dream of drowning in rosewater. You wake gasping, nose twitching, trying to scrub the scent from your brain. It never works. Even your own scent betrays you. You try to stay clean, but opportunities are scarce. A rain barrel here, a stolen basin there. You once washed in a noble's fountain at dawn and pretended to be a ghost when the guards showed up. The only upside is that you no longer care what you smell like. Which is probably why the stable hand flinched when you got too close this morning. You sniffed your sleeve. Onions. And something worse. You sigh. Still, there are stranger smells than yours in the city. You pass a cart selling eels preserved in honey, a monk burning sage and something that definitely wasn't sage, and a street performer juggling lit bundles of herbs while muttering in Latin. Historians still debate what these urban rituals meant. Some say they were for purification. Others think they masked the more unpleasant side of medieval life, disease, rot, or just the simple stink of too many people living too closely. You're inclined to believe both, and yet your quarry moves as though the world around him is made of flowers and light. He doesn't flinch at the stink. He doesn't acknowledge the beggars. He doesn't slow down, so you follow. And you learn, his guards are lazy in the morning. They drink too much at lunch. His dog hates loud noises. His cook favors pears and sings when she's nervous. These details matter. Not because they help with the kill, necessarily, but because they help you understand the rhythm, the flow. Every fortress has a seam. And yet, he doesn't give you one. Every time you get close, he vanishes, not in smoke or shadows. Just gone. You watch him enter a building and never leave. You wait all night. Nothing. By dawn, he's on the other side of the city drinking mead like nothing happened. You begin to question your own senses. Then something strange happens. You lose him completely. 1 minute he's at the market. The next, gone, vanished like a dropped coin. You search for hours. Days, nothing. Then one night, while crouched in an alley beside a broken barrel, you feel something land on your shoulder. A note, no footsteps, no whisper. Just paper. You freeze, unroll it. 2 words. Wrong man. Your blood chills. You reread it twice, then burn it with the stub of a candle. Who wrote it? Was it a warning? A taunt? A clue? You stare into the smoke and feel a knot in your stomach because that scent, the rose water, you smell it again. But this time, it's behind you. You turn, blade half drawn, but there's nothing, just mist. You retreat, slowly, one alley at a time. You don't sleep that night, or the next. You keep moving. Changing beds, changing names, you're not just hunting anymore. You're being watched, followed, maybe tested again. And the worst part, you have no idea if the man you've been tailing for a week was ever your real target. Your employers are silent. The street messengers have stopped appearing. You send a coded note to your last contact, burn the reply unopened. The game just changed. You're not sure what the rules are anymore, but the smell still follows you. And for the first time in years, you wonder, what if you're the one being hunted now? Section 8. You haven't spoken to another person in 3 days, not really spoken. Not past a grunt, a nod, or a muttered, "Aile." You haven't heard your own full voice in so long, you wonder if it still works. Maybe that's the real assassin's curse. Not death, not blood, but the slow erosion of self, and now you're on the road. Again, because when the city turns cold, when the whispers grow sharper than blades, when the scent of rose water follows you down alleys where no one walks, it's time to disappear. You've taken the southern path, through the hills toward the sea, under the pretense of being a peddler. Your pack holds nothing useful to a real merchant, some dried fruit, a few combs, 2 rusty lockpicks hidden in the heel of your boot. You walk beside a horse that isn't yours, rented with false coin from a stable that probably knows by now. The wind bites. The sky grumbles, the road is mud, you're miserable. But it's safer out here, except it's not, really. Travel for an assassin isn't about adventure. It's about surviving all the things between jobs that want to kill you before you even reach your target. Start with the terrain. Rain turns roads into rivers. You've lost boots to mud before, just sucked clean off your feet, like the earth wanted to keep them. You once crossed a ravine on a makeshift bridge made from 2 planks and an old door. The creaking still echoes in your nightmares. Then there are the bandits. Oh, sweet irony, you, professional murderer, being robbed by amateurs with sticks and desperation. They don't scare you, but they complicate things, because you can't afford witnesses or attention. So you give them just enough to send them on their way. Sometimes you leave them a few coins, other times a warning. There was a boy, once, maybe 15, who tried to take your satchel. He left with bruises and a story about the ghost in the woods who smiles before she stabs. You've never smiled like that, not on purpose. But stories grow in dirt like mushrooms. You ride into small villages when needed, blend in. Buy food, sleep with one eye open in barns and by hearths of strangers. You pretend to be deaf sometimes. Or mute. People ask fewer questions. Historians still argue whether wandering killers like you posed as monks, merchants, or pilgrims most often. The truth, all of the above. You once pretended to be a falconer for 2 weeks despite knowing nothing about birds. You learned fast, the hard way, still have the scar on your ear. And let's talk about lodging. There's no inn for someone like you, not unless you pay double and lie convincingly. Most of the time you sleep rough, under trees, in caves. Inside abandoned mills or ruined watchtowers, you once curled up in a graveyard crypt during a storm and woke up with a skull for a pillow. You apologized. It felt right. Then there's food. You steal. You trade. You scavenge. Once ate mushrooms that made the trees whisper secrets in your sleep. Another time you survived 3 days on boiled roots and rainwater. You're not picky anymore. Hunger burns away refinement. Except when you do reach an inn and there's hot stew. You never taste it the way others do, because you're always watching the cook. Always wondering if someone slipped something into your cup, always tasting for bitterness. You know the signs of hemlock, of belladonna, of foxglove. You'd rather go hungry than careless. But the worst part of travel isn't the roads, it's the faces. Every face might be watching. Every child staring too long. Every old man at the fire who seems to know too much. Every woman who serves your drink just a little too carefully. You begin to imagine things. You hope you're imagining things. But paranoia in your line of work isn't a weakness. It's armor. So when you reach the coastal town of Vendrell, you enter like smoke, quiet. Small steps, one hand on your belt, eyes downcast. The guard at the gate waves you through without even looking. Perfect. You find lodging in a small inn run by a blind woman named Reva. She asks no questions. Her dog growls once and then curls at your feet like your family. You like the dog more than most people. Your room is upstairs. Slanted ceiling, one window, one bed. A door that doesn't lock unless you jam it with a spoon. You sleep there anyway, because you're exhausted. And you're close. The letter in your satchel says your real target is already in Vendrell. You don't know their name, only that they wear a silver pin in the shape of a spiral and speak 4 languages. That they once served in the court of a bishop and haven't been seen in 5 years, and that they know who you are, so now you roam the streets. Slowly, carefully, you visit churches, taverns, markets, you watch. You wait, you don't find them, but they find you. Because one night, as you sip weak wine by the harbour, a folded note appears on your table. Again, this time it says, "Stop looking. Start running." And it smells faintly, not of rosewater, but of smoke. The spiral has turned. And the hunter might already be behind you. Section 9, you don't run right away. You sit there, holding the note, feeling its weight, even though it's only paper. The words blur slightly, not from fear, though that's part of it, but from sheer exhaustion. You're so tired, it's become a texture in your bones, like the grain in wood. You read it again. Stop looking. Start running. It's not a threat, it's advice or a warning. Or both, but you know what it really means. You've been burned. Again. And still, instead of bolting into the night like a startled deer, you do what you've learned to do best over the years. You wait, quietly, silently, watching the watcher, because whoever left that note was close. Probably still is. You glance around without moving your head too much. A sailor leans over a railing, hiccuping. A cloaked woman buys chestnuts from a vendor. An old man scratches his leg under a bench. All perfectly forgettable. And maybe one of them is death in disguise. You stay still for nearly an hour, not because you think they'll act, but because you want them to know you know. That's the game now. You're not hiding. You're not attacking, you're waiting. It's the cruelest part of your trade. The cloak and dagger boredom. People think being an assassin is constant action, sword fights on rooftops, chases through alleys, dramatic reveals and whispered names in the dark. And sure, those things happen. But mostly, you wait for hours. Days, sometimes weeks. You sit in lofts, in cellars, in the crooks of old trees and under bridges, blending into the scenery like dust. You learn to be still, to ignore the cramps, to breathe like a statue. You once spent 9 days in a hayloft. 9. The target below slept irregularly. Ate alone, rarely left the house. You watched him eat soup. You watched him nap. You watched him do things with a goat you still don't talk about. And on the 9th day, just as you were finally about to strike, he moved cities. Took the goat with him too. You wept that night, quietly. Into hay, which smells better in stories than it does in real life. Historians still argue whether assassins used patience as a core tactic, or if popular tales exaggerated the wait. You know the truth, the wait is the job. You used to try to pass the time. Little games. Count the rats. Create backstories for passers-by. Sometimes you scribbled poems in the dirt. One about soup turned out strangely heartfelt, but after a while you just get quiet, inside. Your thoughts flatten. You become like the stone wall you lean against, still. Empty, just waiting for motion to return. And when it does, you move like a thunderclap. That's the magic. But here in Vendrell tonight, there's no thunder. Just fog, and a wine glass half empty, and a city that's begun to whisper your name in ways it never has before. So you stand, slowly. Casually, you make your way back to Reva's Inn, though you know it's no longer safe, but there's something upstairs you need to retrieve before vanishing again. The dog meets you at the door, tail wagging. You pause, kneel, scratch behind his ears. He leans into you with a content sigh. You wonder, not for the first time, how long you could live as just a person. With a dog, maybe a quiet trade, baking maybe, or carving things from wood. You've always liked the feel of a blade not pressed against someone's throat. You step inside. The fire is out, the inn is quiet, too quiet. You know this rhythm, you've felt this rhythm. It's the kind of silence that isn't silence at all, it's breath held in waiting. You unsheathe your blade before you reach the stairs. No one stops you. In your room, nothing seems touched. But there's a scent in the air that wasn't there before, not rose water, not smoke. Something else. Old leather, ink. Cold steel. You check your pack, the coins are gone. But in their place is something heavier, a stone, small, smooth, painted with a spiral. You stare at it for a long time. And then you understand, you're not on a mission anymore, you're part of someone else's. The spiral wasn't a signature, it was a signal, a marker. A hunter's knot, and now you are the prey, being led. Being measured, being waited for, just like you've done to others 100 times before. You sit on the bed, close your eyes. You could run. You should run, but something tells you this isn't a chase anymore, it's a summons. Section 10. You don't leave that night, you sit in the room, blade across your knees, eyes fixed on the painted spiral stone like it might speak if you stare long enough. It doesn't. But it doesn't need to. The message is loud and clear. Someone has plans for you. You sleep with your back to the wall, blade in hand. It's not rest, not even close. Your mind runs loops, trying to imagine who left that stone, who's watching, who's waiting. You think of Calder, of the man in the tavern. Of every shadow that lingered too long, every name that was too easily forgotten. By morning, you've made your decision. You can't play the game anymore unless you know the rules. And to know the rules, you need leverage, and leverage only comes with risk, so you do something stupid. You go looking, but not for your pursuer, you go looking for your employer. The one who started this whole chain, who paid you in silver and silence and left you in the grip of a ghost. You return to the last place you saw him, the tavern with the crooked sign, the one where the cheese was bad and the bread tried to kill you. You order wine this time? Not because you want it, but because you remember he drank ale. You're hoping to draw attention. You sit by the window, watch the street and wait 4 hours. Then he walks in, calm, clean, just like before. He sits without being asked, orders nothing. Just looks at you. I see you're still alive, he says mildly, like you just returned from a walk, not a manhunt. You stare. Why the spiral? He raises an eyebrow. You're asking the wrong question. Then what's the right one? He leans forward, hands laced. What do you know about failure? You blink. Enough, he nods. But do you know what happens after? You don't answer, so he continues. Most people think failure is punishment enough, that it breaks you, ends your usefulness. But some people become more dangerous after they fail. He reaches into his sleeve and pulls out another spiral stone, lays it on the table beside yours. There's a group, he says. Old, patient, they don't recruit. They don't train, they test, they watch those who failed, assassins, spies, soldiers. They wait for the ones who rise. He taps the stone. You failed. You lived. You rose. So this is a job offer? He smiles. Of sorts. Historians still argue whether medieval secret societies used tokens like these to mark future initiates. Some say it's folklore. Others claim entire webs of killers and couriers moved by nothing more than signs, stones, and whispered riddles. You know this isn't just a job anymore. It's a shift. A change in your world's shape. You leave the tavern without another word. The stone burns cold in your palm. But you still don't trust it, because you remember what happens when things go wrong. You remember what failure really means. You think of the boy in Bern, the one you couldn't reach in time. You think of the noblewoman's maid who saw too much and screamed your name. You think of the merchant's child asleep in the next room when you took the father's life and told yourself it was clean. You think of the first time you failed. The punishment wasn't death. It was spectacle. They made you walk the city with a sign tied around your neck, listing the sin, coward, hesitation. Failure? They shaved your head, smeared your face with ash, made you kneel in the square while people threw rotten fruit. That night you didn't sleep, you bled into straw, you whispered oaths to yourself you still haven't broken. The next job you didn't hesitate, not again, you became something else. Not just an assassin, a warning, and now You think maybe someone noticed. The man in the tavern is gone again, but the stone remains. So you decide, if you're being tested, you're going to pass. You start planning, not a kill. Not a theft, a message. You're going to find whoever left that note, whoever's watching, and you're going to show them that you don't wait anymore. You act. You start small, you return to the harbour, speak to a contact. Bribe a clerk for ship records, find names, destinations. One stands out, a courier headed inland with a crate marked only with a spiral. You follow. 3 days through the forest. Mud again, rain of course. A boar crosses your path once and nearly ends your career. But eventually you reach the river town of Lowen's Gate, and there in a riverside warehouse you find your answers. Kind of. Because inside the crate isn't gold or maps or names, it's a mirror, polished obsidian. Tall, framed in iron, behind it a small wooden plaque. One word, watch. So you do, for minutes. Then hours, you fall asleep on the floor, you dream of your own face. Older, tired, speaking in a voice you don't remember. You wake up in sweat, and the mirror is gone, just gone. Only the plaque remains. Someone wanted you to see yourself, not as you are, but as you will become, and now you're afraid. Not of death, but of what's coming. Section 11, the road back from Lowen's Gate feels longer. Heavier. Like every step is pulling you deeper into something you can't name yet. The crate is gone, the mirror vanished, the message seared into your mind. Watch. You've spent your life being unseen, watching others, tracking, observing from the shadows. But now someone is watching you, closely, intimately. And the worst part? You don't know what they want. You return to the inn at Vendrell. Not because it's safe, but because it's familiar. And in your line of work, familiar is as close to comfort as you ever get. Riva greets you with a nod. Doesn't ask where you've been. The dog just wags its tail and resumes its nap. You sit in your room, cloak still wet, boots dripping onto the floor, and you take stock of your life. The kills, the runs, the waiting, the stones, the spirals, and then your fingers find the pouch at your side, the original silver coins from the tavern job. You haven't spent them, not one. You pour them out on the floor. Wait, you count, twice. 7, there were 8. You stare at the empty spot in the palm of your hand. 1 missing, you scan the room, and that's when you realize you've been robbed. Again, but not by a thief. A real thief would have taken everything. This was surgical, intentional, a message. You lift one of the remaining coins, hold it to the light. On the face of the coin, not visible until now, is a faint etching. A spiral, almost too light to see, but it's there. You check the others, all of them marked. You missed it, all this time. The payment wasn't just currency. It was a tracker. Someone marked you the moment they hired you. Someone's been counting your steps since the very beginning. And that means they know where you are, right, now. You leap to your feet. The dog growls at the door, then whines. Then scratches. Something's wrong. You press yourself to the wall, blade drawn, breath shallow. Riva calls up the stairs, voice strained. Visitor for you. Says he's your cousin. You don't have cousins. You knock twice on the floor. A signal. Riva goes silent. The dog whimpers. Then a crash. You move. Out the window onto the roof tiles, slipping once, catching yourself on a chimney. Your knees are soaked, cloak snagging on slate edges. You drop to the alley and vanish into the maze of back streets. You run until your lungs ache. And then, finally, you stop. You duck into the undercellar of an abandoned bakery. It still smells faintly of yeast and ash. You collapse beside a rusted oven, and you wonder, how long has this been going on? Was the employer in the tavern real? Was Calder playing a part? Was any of it real? Or have you been inside the spiral since the beginning? Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were part of larger conspiracies or just lone operators tangled in noble games. But you've lived enough to know. You don't need to join a conspiracy. You just need to be useful to one. And now, you're more than useful, you're bait. For what, you have no idea, but the signs are clear. The spiral isn't a symbol, it's a trap, and you're in it. Which means it's time to do what no one expects. You stop moving, you go still, you hide. You let them think you're gone. You become nothing. For 3 weeks, you vanish. No jobs, no contacts. You change towns. Change faces. You burn your old cloak. You cut your hair. You pretend to be a mute herbalist living with a widow and her chickens. They don't ask questions, but you're not just hiding. You're watching, waiting, and on the 23rd day, your patience pays off. You spot him in the market square, just for a moment. A man with the same silver-etched spiral on his belt, tall, hooded. Carrying a satchel like yours, you follow, 2 steps behind. 1 street over, you mirror his pace, his posture, you become his shadow. Until he leads you into a courtyard with no exits, he turns and smiles. Not with his mouth, with his eyes, then says, "We were wondering when you'd stop running." You open your mouth to speak. But behind you, the gate locks. Section 12, the sound of the gate locking behind you isn't loud, it's soft. Final, like a breath closing a door. You don't turn. You don't have to. You already know whoever locked it isn't a guard, isn't a drunk, isn't a bystander. It's someone who's been trained, like you, to be invisible until the exact moment they don't want to be. The man in front of you, spiral on his belt, calm as a priest at a funeral, tilts his head. "You lasted longer than the others," he says. Others, that word lands like a weight. You shift your stance, not aggressively, just ready. He sees it, smiles slightly. "Don't bother. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding." You raise your eyebrows. "Comforting, isn't it?" Silence falls. You scan the courtyard, 4 stories high, stone walls. Windows shuttered, 1 door behind the man, no balconies. No ropes, a cistern in the corner mossed over, a drain near your foot. 1 crow watching from a ledge, head tilted like it's in on the joke. This isn't a trap, it's a stage. And you're the act. "So what is this?" you ask. "A test? An offer? A warning?" "Yes," he replies, "of course." He gestures to the door behind him. She's waiting. That word stops you. She. There's always a she in stories like this. A queen, a countess, a rogue noble with too much money and too little conscience. But in your line of work, she usually means someone very old, very smart, and very dangerous. You follow, through the door, down a tight corridor. Damp walls, torches, the smell of parchment and metal, and the faintest hint of incense. Your boots echo. They want them to echo. It's theatre. They're building a mood. You arrive at a circular chamber. No windows. 1 high, domed ceiling. A stone table in the middle, empty except for a single folded sheet of paper and a dagger laid across it. A woman stands to the right. Tall, silver hair braided tightly. Robes that don't suggest wealth, but power. The kind of garments worn by people who command rooms simply by entering them. Her face is lined, not with age, but experience. Her hands are bare. No rings, no symbols, just scars. You know fighters when you see them. She doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't need to. "You've been watched," she says. "Not because you're the best, but because you're the last." You blink. "Last of what?" She looks at the dagger, then at you. You already know. And in a horrible, dizzying way, you do. Not consciously, not clearly, but somewhere deep in the marrow of your experience, something has been building. The tests, the messages, the mirror, the missing coin, the spiral. It wasn't just a trap. It was a weeding, a slow, methodical pruning of a guild that once numbered dozens, maybe hundreds. You are what's left. You were chosen, she continues, but not to kill, to survive. To endure every lie we fed you, every twist, every death. She points to the sheet of paper. That is your name, your true name, the one we erased. You don't move. You can take it, she says, or you can walk away. You don't trust gifts, especially not when they come with daggers. Historians still argue whether names held true power in ancient guilds, that to know the real name of an agent was to hold their fate. Some believe they were erased from records intentionally to protect them. Others claim it was punishment. You step forward, lift the dagger, the blade is warm. Not with heat, but with use, not ceremonial. Real. You pick up the paper, unfold it. You stare at the word. It means nothing to you, not anymore. It was yours, once, but you've killed that version of yourself 100 times over. She watches you. Then says, you have a choice. You look at her. No, I don't. And that's when you understand. This is the retirement plan. There's no gold. No land, no peace, just promotion. You're not being released. You're being recruited. You want me to lead, you say? She nods. You want me to shape the next generation, train them, test them. She doesn't blink. We always test our own. And if I refuse, she looks toward the doorway. Then the next test begins. Of course. You think of Reva, of Calder, of the boy with the ring. Of the dog, all pieces on this board, you sigh. Then sit at the table, place the dagger down, and say the first thing you've said in weeks that feels real. What do you need me to do? The woman nods. And behind her the spiral symbol glows faintly on the wall, a promise, a prison. A path, section 13. You wake in a stone room that wasn't yours the night before. There's a cot, a table, a basin of cold water, and a new cloak folded neatly at the foot of the bed, thicker, darker, lined with leather and stitched with the faintest trace of a spiral near the hem. So, it's official, you've said yes. Or at least, you didn't say no. You stand, stretch, wash your face in the freezing water. Every movement feels heavier now, not just from fatigue, but from implication. You're no longer the hunted, but you're not quite the hunter either. You're something else. Initiated, they don't call it that, of course. No oaths. No ceremonial chalice. Just a shift in how people look at you. A little longer. A little warier. Like you've stepped into a new shape and no one is quite sure where the edges are anymore. You're assigned a name. Not your old one, not the one on the parchment, but something new. Symbolic, clean, like they want to wash the blood from your past but keep the scent. You're now referred to as Ash. You ask why. The answer is simple. You survived the fire. You're given a schedule. Not missions, lessons. You teach. You listen, you watch. You're shown a dozen faces, recruits, young and raw, bruised and hopeful. Some are eager, too eager. Others are broken in all the wrong ways, lacking discipline or worse, lacking fear. You're not here to train killers, you're here to forge witnesses. That's what the woman said. Her name, by the way, is never given. She's just called the Voice. The world needs more watchers than swords, she told you one night over flickering candles and stale wine. We send too many blades into the dark and they vanish. We need eyes now. Minds. So that's what you do. You build them, but first you study them. You sit in a high alcove above the training yard, watching the way one boy can't stop shifting his weight from foot to foot, the way another always stares at the ground, the girl with the steady hand but wandering attention. You mark them all. You whisper notes into a slate. Some will pass. Some won't, and some will be tested like you were. That's the part you didn't expect. You thought the spiral ended with you, but now you see, you were just one loop. Historians still argue whether secret orders relied more on psychological testing or martial training. The stories talk about poison, pain, shadows, but you now understand the real weapon they forged was control, not of the blade, of the will, because these children, they're not being taught how to kill, they're being taught how to observe without breaking, to wait 10 days in a crawl space and still come out sane, to learn a language in 3 weeks because the mission demands it, to betray their instincts if the pattern calls for it, to turn stillness into strength. You wonder often whether you're making them better or worse. One night, a boy approaches your quarters. He's young, too young, says his name is Lorne. Says he saw something, a man with a spiral ring meeting in the woods with someone who shouldn't be there. He's nervous. Sweating, you nod, say nothing. Because this is his test. You watch him walk away, and you know, if he doesn't follow up, if he doesn't act, he'll be removed, not punished. Just removed, quietly. That's how the spiral worked. You weren't chosen because you killed well. You were chosen because you endured quietly, because you never snapped. Never asked too many questions, because you watched, even when watching meant seeing things no one should, like the time you followed a noble to a chapel and saw what he did to that chained man. Or the girl in the alley whose cries didn't stop until morning. You were told not to interfere, so you didn't. but you never forgot. And that's the real reason you're here, isn't it? Not because you were good, but because you remember. They want you to shape the next generation into that. People who remember. People who don't forget, even when forgetting would be easier. The voice tells you the order has existed for centuries. You ask her what its name is. She says, we don't give names to what survives. And maybe she's right. Names are for tombstones. Spirals are for movements. Still, you miss the simplicity of being a blade, of knowing the target, making the plan, striking, vanishing. Now, you're a hand guiding dozens of blades you'll never meet again. You're a whisper in someone's mission, a footnote in someone else's fate. But something in you settles. This place, for all its secrets, feels like something you can build inside of. Until one morning, you find a letter under your door. Sealed in wax, unmarked, inside. A name, not a target, but a child's name. And beside it, yours, as in, you're assigned to watch them, train them, prepare them. You sit down slowly. You've been a shadow. A sword, a lesson, a warning. Now, you're a guardian, and in this world, that might be the most dangerous thing of all. Section 14. The child's name is Evan. He's 9, maybe 10. Skinny, always barefoot, even on cold stone floors. You first see him crouched by the cistern, throwing pebbles into the water like it holds secrets he hasn't yet earned. You don't introduce yourself, you sit nearby, quiet. Let him throw his stones. 1, 2, 3. Eventually he speaks without turning. They said you'd come. You nod. I did. They said you were the last. Maybe. He tosses another pebble. It skips once, then sinks. You begin. Not with a lesson, not with a blade, but with silence. Because before someone can learn to disappear, they must learn how to exist without needing to be seen. For the first week, you teach him how to listen, not just to voices, but to breath, to footsteps, to intention. You blindfold him and move around the room in silence. He's terrible at first, calls the walls doors, mistakes echoes for footsteps, but he gets better. On the 5th day, he throws a book at your head as you approach. You let it hit you, because it means he heard. Progress. In week 2, you take him into the tunnels. He's afraid of the dark. Says it reminds him of a cellar he was locked in as a baby. You don't ask who locked him there, you just hand him a candle stub and say, then we walk through it until it stops mattering. You don't coddle. But you never lie. That's important, because lies are currency here. Everyone spends them. But a teacher's job, your job, is to be the one person in the spiral who never lies to those coming up the path. You tell him when he fails. You tell him when he's seen. You tell him when he needs to start over, and when he does well. You nod, that's all, because anything more would be expectation. And expectation kills. You train him for 3 months, no missions. Just watching. One day he sees something. A visitor arrives, a courier with black gloves, a scarred face, and a sealed chest chained to his belt. He doesn't speak to anyone except the voice. Evan notices that he limps only when others are watching. He tells you quietly that night over bread and dried figs. He's pretending, he says, but not for us. For who then? I don't know, but he made the guard laugh. Loudly, too loudly, you pause, because laughter here is always measured. You send Evan to bed, and then you follow the courier yourself, just to see. You find him sitting by the fire in the East Hall, alone, writing a letter. The ink is too dark, the handwriting forced. You wait until he leaves. Then you read it. The words are nonsense, phrases strung together that make no sense. But every third line matches a cipher you learned years ago, one you weren't supposed to remember. It says, Ash is alive. Still watching, still dangerous. You stare at the ink until it dries, and something in your chest shifts. Because you realize they didn't recruit you to shape the future. They recruited you because the past still fears you. They want you close. Under watch, caged politely, Evan. He's not your student, he's your mirror. You were 9 once. Afraid, alone, thrown into a spiral you didn't understand. And someone watched you too, probably with the same wary hope you feel now. You begin training Evan harder. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with urgency. Because you don't know how long this will last, and you want him ready. You teach him to lie with his eyes, to cry on cue, to memorize faces, to drink a vial of sleep water and slow his heart to mimic death. He does it all. Once you test him, you disappear for 2 days. Leave no trace, no note, no hint. When you return, he's asleep in your cot, knife under the blanket, wax seal of your room's door imitated and placed on the floor. He wakes. You left, he says simply. You nod. I waited. Why? Because if you died, I'd need to avenge you. You don't smile. You can't. Because that's not loyalty, that's conditioning. You've made him too good. Too quickly. One morning you find a spiral etched into your table. Small, crude, childlike. You confront him. Why did you carve this? He looks at you, calm, steady. To remind me. Of what? That I'm not real yet. You sit beside him, stare at the spiral, and realize what you've done. You've taken a child and turned him into a concept, a symbol, just like they did to you. And now, you don't know whether to be proud or terrified. Historians still debate whether the spiral was a symbol of enlightenment or collapse. Whether it meant rising or sinking, you're living proof that it means both. So you ask Evan a question. If you were told to kill me tomorrow, would you? He doesn't blink. No, but I'd ask why and then decide. You nod once. That's the best answer you've heard in years, and possibly the most dangerous, because it means he's becoming himself. Not you, not them, himself. And that's hope, and hope in the spiral is the one thing they can't control. Section 15. The cold comes early this year. Frost laces the edges of your window. The stone walls breathe mist with every breath of dawn. Even your boots groan when you put them on, as if resenting the cold as much as you do, and with the cold comes politics. The voice calls a gathering. Small, tight-lipped, you and 4 others. You know the faces but not the names, because names even here are currency. Everyone is Ash or Thorn or Wren or Hollow. No one is who they used to be. The voice stands at the center, arms behind her back. There's unrest, she says, outside the walls. Always is. But this time it's different. There's a noble family near the coast, she continues, once loyal, now divided, a son who vanished, a daughter who speaks too freely, a cousin who's begun to write pamphlets, and someone's funding them. You don't ask who, because it's never about who. It's about what they threaten. They must be watched, she says, but not touched. Yet. You nod. You're sent to observe the daughter. Name, Lady Esmera Lorth. Age, 19. Last seen, riding alone to the ruins of Old Lyric with a satchel and no guards. That already tells you plenty. She's bold, she moves without fear, she has resources. And no one stops her. You travel alone, disguised as a stable hand with poor posture and a fake tooth. You reach Old Lyric by the 3rd day. It's cold, crumbling. Wind haunted, and she's there, standing in the broken arch of an ancient hall, facing west, cloak billowing like a standard. You don't speak, you just watch for 2 days. She doesn't return to the manor. She sleeps under stone, eats dry bread, writes in a leather-bound book. On the 3rd night she lights a fire with spiral-marked parchment. Your breath catches, not a copy, the real mark from the order. But how? You approach her on the 4th day. Deliberately, no shadows, no games. She looks at you, unafraid. You're late, she says. You say nothing, she smiles. I thought you'd come sooner. They always do. That rattles you. You sit across from her. She hands you the book. Inside, sketches, notes, names. Spirals drawn in the margins. You scan one name and freeze. It's yours. Not Ash, the other one, the one from the parchment in the voices chamber. The one they said was erased. She sees your reaction. They lied to you, she says gently. The spiral didn't choose you, it used you. You close the book. Who are you? I'm the daughter of the man you killed in Vendrell. You blink. Which man? She smiles. Exactly. You remember that job, middle of winter. No clear reason, just a pouch of silver and a name. You slipped into his study, quiet as snowfall. Made it look like illness. Never thought of him again, until now. Why spiral parchment, you ask? To see if they'd send someone, to see if they feared me. You don't answer. Because they do, or they fear what she knows, or maybe they fear what you might decide to do next. I'm not angry, she says. You were a knife. Someone else held the handle. She tosses another page into the fire. I don't want revenge. Then what do you want? She pauses, to know if anyone in that place still has a soul. You look at her for a long time. She's smart. Too smart, not afraid to look you in the eye, not afraid of the truth. Just tired of it. You give her back the book. I'm not your answer, you say. But you might be someone else's. She nods once, like that was the answer she expected. That night, you don't return to the order. Not right away. You find a quiet cave near the ruins. You sleep. You think. And for the first time in months, you don't dream of knives. You dream of choices. Because the spiral isn't just a trap, it's a cycle, and every cycle can be broken if someone decides to stop turning. Historians still argue whether assassins ever rebelled. Some say yes, that entire branches vanished to start their own paths. Others believe the order always snuffed out the dissenters before they had a chance. But you sit by the fire, staring at your hands and think, what if it's not about rebellion? What if it's about deciding who you really are? You return to the order 5 days later. The voice meets you in the hall. You were gone longer than ordered. You nod. She eyes you. Did you watch her? Yes. Did you kill her? No. Pause. She'll be a problem. Then I'll deal with it, you say, and walk past her before she can respond. You find Evan in the training yard. He's sparring with a boy twice his size. He loses hard, but when he hits the ground, he laughs. That scares you more than anything else. Because laughter means freedom, and freedom is the one thing the spiral can't allow. So you help him up, silently. And you wonder, what happens when the next generation stops fearing the spiral? What happens when they start questioning it? You may have survived the fire, but they might just light a new one. Section 16, you start noticing the little things. A whisper that stops when you enter a room. A sparring schedule changed without your knowledge. A guard stationed outside your door. For your safety, they say. You know what this is. It's not a punishment, it's not exile, it's containment. The order doesn't trust you anymore, and that's fair, you suppose, because you don't trust them either. The spiral is closing. You feel it, not just around you, but within you. The sense of purpose that once drove you, the clean certainty of the blade, the clarity of a contract, it's gone. Now there's just tension and questions. And Evan, he's watching you closely these days, more than before. You've taught him well, too well. He's noticing things you didn't think he'd catch. A tremor in your fingers. A pause too long before a lie, a half-burned letter in the brazier you didn't destroy fast enough. He hasn't said anything. But he knows. One night he asks the question, the only one that matters. Would you leave, if you could? You don't answer. Because the truth is, you've already left. In your heart, in your thoughts. Your feet are still here, but your soul is on the road, walking west, following something you don't even have a name for yet. You don't sleep that night. You sit by the cistern where you once watched Evan throw stones, and you think about how it all began, how you used to run from jobs, how you used to wait in alleys for hours just for a glimpse of your target, how you once saw your own reflection in a pool of blood and felt nothing. Now you look at still water and feel everything: regret, confusion, wonder, fear even, not fear of dying. But fear of dying without ever choosing your own path, and then you hear it, the phrase, spoken softly behind you. Ash has burned too long. You turn slowly, it's Ren. Younger, smiling in a way that doesn't reach his eyes. 2 others stand behind him. Not children, not recruits, cleaners. You've been marked. You stand, hands empty, cloak open, no weapons drawn, because you know how this goes. You could just say goodbye, you say. We're not allowed, Ren replies. You nod. Of course. Any last words? You think, then say, tell the voice. She taught me well. And then you move. You don't run. You vanish, because that's the part they forgot. They taught you how to disappear. How to fake your death. How to survive in a world that wants you dead. They forgot that you learned all of it from them. The tunnels beneath the compound still remember your footsteps. The cracks in the west wall still hide your old rope. The whisper paths still echo your breath. You're not fighting them, you're outpacing them. Historians still argue whether anyone ever escaped the spiral, whether anyone walked away and lived to tell about it. Some say the spiral consumes everything. Others say someone made it out. Maybe that someone is you. You don't know where you're going yet, but you know how to get there. You leave behind everything, your cloak, your name, your legacy. Except one thing, Evan, you leave him a note. Short, written in code. He'll understand it when he's ready. It says, the spiral isn't a prison, it's a path, but you don't have to walk it, and then you go. You walk through frost and fog, through river valleys and crumbling ruins. You change faces again. And again, you become wind, and somewhere days later in a village where no one knows your name, you sit by a fire and feel something you haven't felt in years. Not triumph, not relief, but peace. It's quiet, you're alone, and the spiral, it's behind you now, or maybe it's still turning, but this time, you're no longer inside it. Section 17, the village is small, quiet in the way places are when the world forgets them. You don't ask questions, you help stack firewood, you mend a gate. You drink warm milk for the first time in a decade. No one here knows what you've done. No one here cares. They call you the quiet one. You sleep in a loft above a baker's shed. The smell of yeast wakes you every morning. It's strange. Gentle, like the universe is trying to apologize in crust and steam. You don't send messages. You don't take names. You don't look over your shoulder. Much. But some habits never leave. At night you walk the outskirts of the village. No cloak. No dagger, just memory and muscle. You pass an old well. Drop a stone, listen for the echo. It's deep. Still. And it reminds you of the first time you felt weightless. Not in joy. Not in fear. But in the in-between, the breath between silence and strike, the heartbeat before decision. You live there now. One day a boy enters the village, skinny, mismatched boots. Sharp eyes. He doesn't approach right away, just watches you from a distance. For days, until finally one morning he speaks. You taught someone I know. You pause. Wait, he continues. His name was Evan. You say nothing. The boy nods. He told me to find you, said you could teach me how to see. You look at the boy. Really see him, and for the first time the spiral doesn't feel like a chain. It feels like a thread. Woven from survival and choice, you lead the boy to the edge of the river. You sit, you begin, not with a lesson, but with silence, because the only thing more dangerous than a killer is a witness who remembers and teaches others to do the same. You don't tell him your name, because you don't have one anymore. You just exist. Here, now, and somehow that's enough. The fire crackles low now. The embers glow like memories you don't need to carry anymore. The world outside is soft, muted, the kind of quiet that settles after the last page of a book, when you close the cover and sit still, not to end it, but to feel it linger. You breathe, slowly. Each breath is lighter than the one before. No footsteps chase you now, no names demand remembering, no spiral to trace and retrace and fall into. Just stillness, and that stillness is yours. The cloak is folded in a trunk beneath a bed that creaks in the early morning chill. The dagger is rusting by the garden wall. The coin, etched with a spiral, is buried under a cherry tree where the blossoms fall like snow each spring. Somewhere far away, someone else walks a path you once knew. But they don't walk it alone, because you showed them how to walk with eyes open, spine steady, choices made instead of inherited. You close your eyes. The stars above this village are different, brighter maybe, or maybe you're just still enough to see them now. Let that spiral turn if it must. You're done with it, you're free. Sleep now, watcher, you've earned the quiet.